the forbidden fixer in the heart of the Valyrian Empire. Inside the giant throne hangar that looked more like a holy temple than a military hall, thousands of alien soldiers stood in perfect lines, their silver armor reflecting purple lights that came from the glowing ceiling rings. Everything was silent like deep space. No one dared breathe loudly, because today their queen had returned from battle, and everyone knew what that meant. She was not just a ruler, she was a living storm, a being of power and pride, feared by enemy empires and worshipped by her own kind, and whenever she walked, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, the thunder doors at the end of the hall slammed open with a heavy boom that shook the floor. The queen marched forward, her steps echoing like hammers hitting steel. Her legendary obsidian armor was cracked, burned in places, and leaking blue energy that hissed like furious fire. This armor was no ordinary armor. It was a sacred relic, a living shell linked to her life force. Created by ancient masters thousands of years ago, only royal smiths could touch it, and even they rarely dared, yet today it was damaged. And that alone was a thing no one had seen in centuries. Her eyes were sharp like blades, burning with anger and something deeper, humiliation. Her voice echoed across the hall, shaking every soul. "Who touched my sacred armor?" Her words thundered, heavy with fury and disbelief, because she saw it. Someone had repaired her armor. Someone had dared to touch what no mortal should ever touch. The edges of the cracks were sealed with perfect precision. The energy lines were aligned better than before. The armor looked stronger, smoother, almost reborn, but that was impossible. No alien smith could repair it, and certainly no outsider could even understand it. Yet it was fixed, as if the impossible had been done in secret. Her voice roared again, louder. Who dared fix what only the gods forged? Not a single soldier moved. Fear spread like freezing wind. It was death to touch the queen's armor without her command. Every alien knew this law. It was older than the empire itself, but someone had broken it. Someone had stood inches away from the most dangerous being in the galaxy and repaired her armor. And that someone was now standing somewhere in this giant hall. Rows and rows of alien warriors looked at each other in terror. Some shook, some prayed silently. Some hoped the guilty one would speak, because if the queen found out herself, the punishment would be far worse. Her eyes scanned every face, her energy aura rising, making armor vibrate when suddenly, from the very back row, a single hand slowly lifted, calm and steady, like it had no fear of death at all. Gasps spread through the hall. Alien eyes widened in disbelief, because that hand did not belong to a Valyrian warrior, nor a noble, nor a sacred smith. It was a human hand, a soft-skinned, biologically weaker, often insulted species in the galaxy. A simple human engineer named Ethan. He stood there quietly, his face calm, no shaking, no bowing. He did not try to hide or panic. He simply raised his hand like a normal person answering a classroom question. And in that moment the hall felt even quieter. If silence could have a sound, this silence screamed. Ethan walked forward slowly, every step echoing. Eyes of thousands burning into him, aliens whispered among themselves. A human. A soft-worlder? How dare he? But Ethan kept walking, his movements calm, like this was not a moment where death waited at the end of his sentence. Finally, he stopped before the queen, who looked down at him like a mountain staring at a tiny bird. Her voice dangerous cold now, not loud but sharp. "You touched what is forbidden," she said. "Why?" Her hand rested near her weapon. Her power aura flickered like lightning ready to strike. But Ethan looked straight at her without fear, and his answer was simple, soft yet powerful. "Because it was broken." Those words echoed through every mind in the hall. No excuses, no fancy speech, just truth. He spoke like someone who believed fixing things was not a crime but a duty. The queen's eyes narrowed, shock flickered inside her anger. No one ever spoke to her like that. No one ever answered with such calm honesty in the face of certain death. She leaned closer, her presence pressing like gravity. "Do you understand what touching the royal armor means?" She asked, and Ethan nodded. "Yes," he said. But broken things deserve to be repaired, even if they are sacred. And that simple sentence shook the Empire more than a nuclear blast could. Whispers turned into tiny tremors of fear and curiosity. Everyone expected him to beg, to kneel, to cry, but this human did not. Instead, he looked like someone who only followed one rule. If something was damaged, he fixed it, no matter what. The Queen's mind battled between rage and disbelief. She had seen warriors scream and kneel, queens of other worlds tremble. But here stood a human engineer who did not even flinch. The hall's tension rose until even the air felt heavy. And then the Queen lifted her hand, ready to judge him, energy glowing around her like a rising storm. Everyone thought this was the end, but Ethan's eyes stayed calm. Not proud, not arrogant, just fearless, as if he already accepted whatever would come next. As if courage was simply his nature, in that silent moment. The fate of one human, and perhaps the future of the whole empire, waited on the Queen's next breath, and the entire galaxy would remember this day. The day a human raised his hand instead of bowing his head, and dared to fix the armor of a living god, the human who saw flaws. The Queen stared at Ethan with eyes like burning stars, her breath slow and dangerous as if the universe itself waited for her command. Behind her, commanders clenched their weapons, eager to strike the human where he stood, while priests whispered curses, praying that the sacred armor had not been polluted by mortal hands. But the Queen raised one hand and everyone froze. She wanted answers first. Her voice cut the silence like a blade. "Explain how you repaired what even our ancient smiths could not," she demanded. And again, Ethan did not bow, did not shake. He only stood straight and said in calm voice, "It was cracked. Energy was leaking. I stabilized the channel and reinforced the lattice." The hall gasped. He spoke like the armor was simple, like it was just metal and circuits. Not a divine relic feared by galaxies. Eyes around him widened with anger and pride. How dare a human speak so casually about sacred technology? But Ethan was not trying to insult anyone. He simply saw things the way they were, not the way tradition forced others to see them, and that made him even more dangerous in their eyes. The Queen stepped closer, her shadow falling over him like a falling sky. "You are not Valyrian. You do not know our sacred systems. How did you understand the weave?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft now. But Ethan simply replied, "Metal tells a story. Circuits whisper. Energy flows. You just listen." His simple words made generals rage. One of them roared, "Foolish human, our armor is made with divine knowledge, not childish logic." Ethan turned and looked at him without fear. "Divine or not, it was broken," he said. "I repair broken things." Those words felt heavy. Like truth does when it crushes pride, some soldiers almost trembled, because they saw something terrifying. Not arrogance, but simple honesty, and honesty sometimes stings more than insult. The Queen's jaw tightened. She had seen arrogance before, but this was not arrogance. This was clarity. Humans were strange. Unpredictable creatures, soft bodies but steel hearts. They did not kneel to fear the way others did. She remembered battles where humans fought long after their bodies should have given up. Like something inside them could not surrender, and now this one stood before her, fixing sacred armor with the same calmness a child fixes a toy. She circled him slowly, studying him like a puzzle no one could solve. "You should fear me," she whispered close to his ear. The whole hall shivering at those words, but instead of breaking, Ethan looked at her and said gently, "Fear distracts. I do not like wasting time." For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, not fury, but curiosity mixed with disbelief. She had conquered worlds, broken kings, silenced gods, yet this one human stood like he was equal to her. Not by status, not by power, but by spirit. She did not know whether to destroy him or understand him. Her generals shouted from behind, demanding she order his execution to protect sacred honor, but she raised her hand again, silencing them instantly. "Bring the armor scanners," she commanded, and a group of technicians rushed forward, machines humming, ancient crystals glowing. They scanned the armor, and silence fell again as the results appeared. The repairs were flawless. Energy flow was stable. Power output increased. The armor, the sacred living armor of the Valyrian Queen, had not only been fixed but improved beyond original design. Shock spread like fire. Priests collapsed to their knees, some calling it blasphemy, others whispering that maybe this human had been chosen by fate. But Ethan simply looked uninterested in their panic. To him, it was just work, a broken system repaired. The Queen's eyes narrowed. She could lie to herself no longer. This human did the impossible. She asked again, "Who taught you this?" And he answered softly, "Nobody. I learned by trying." The simplicity of his answer felt heavier than a mountain. In their empire, knowledge was inherited by bloodlines. Power came from birth. Yet this human believed skill came from effort. From trying, from failing and learning. It was a dangerous idea, because if it spread, if others believed they could rise without divine right, the whole foundation of the empire would shake. The Queen knew this, but she also knew truth when she heard it. And this human spoke truth. She stepped back, studying him deeply, something inside her beginning to shift. Ethan looked around at the hall filled with hostility and whispered, "If something is broken, I fix it. That is all." And those simple words echoed through every soldier, every priest, every noble, because they realized something terrifying. Humans did not need gods to guide them. They built their own path. They solved what others prayed over. They dared where others obeyed. And as the Queen stared at the quiet engineer who had shaken her empire with calm honesty, she wondered if this was the beginning of a new age, or the greatest threat she had ever faced. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the universe is not the one who destroys, but the one who repairs. The armor's hidden truth. Whispers crawled through the throne hanger like invisible smoke as alien engineers and priests gathered around holographic displays, their eyes wide with disbelief and fear. Each new scan result that appeared made the hall feel heavier, more unreal, because the ancient armor that had protected their queen for centuries, armor believed to be blessed by cosmic gods, was not only repaired by a human but was now functioning better than ever before. Stronger energy flow, stabilized power veins, renewed life circuits. The sacred living weave pulsed brighter, smoother, like a heart that had been freed from pain after years of silent suffering. Even the Queen felt it. She could sense her own strength running more freely, as if some old invisible chain around her soul had loosened without her permission. Yet her pride and anger did not let her show it. She stood tall, but inside her thoughts churned like a storm across galaxies. One of the high priests trembled as he spoke. "Your Majesty, the sacred forge runes are responding differently. The armor's soul thread appears. Rejuvenated." That word alone shook everyone. Rejuvenated. Ancient relics never rejuvenated. They only decayed slowly with time, despite prayers and rituals. But here it was, glowing with renewed force. All because of a human touch. Another priest screamed in denial, "This is corruption. Filthy mortal hands have violated the goddess-forged shell." He tried to rip off his own ceremonial chain in panic, but guards held him back. One elder engineer whispered to another, "No alien smith ever healed the life fiber like this. What method did he use?" And even though they whispered, Ethan heard. He always listened more than he spoke, but he stayed silent, observing the chaos he never intended to create. And that silence made many fear him more than any warrior could. The Queen turned to Ethan again, her voice low, sharp like ice sliding across steel. "How did you touch the life fiber without breaking it? Even seasoned forge priests bleed if they move a fraction wrong." Ethan shrugged lightly, as if explaining something obvious. "I did not think about sacredness. I thought about the problem," he said. "I saw energy trying to flow but blocked by old breaks. I opened the channels and reinforced them." His explanation sounded simple, but everyone knew it was impossibly difficult. Except he did not act like a miracle worker. He acted like a mechanic explaining why he tightened a screw. That calm tone made the royal elite feel threatened because they lived on tradition. Titles, blood, and fear while this human lived on logic and courage, and that meant he could not be controlled by the old ways. Suddenly, the queen pressed her palm on her armor panel, and a hidden chamber in the breastplate revealed itself, glowing gently, showing a tiny crack deep inside, thin like a hairline but ancient and full of sadness. Her voice dropped lower than before. "This," she said, "even my ancestors' best smiths could not repair this wound. It was believed to be part of destiny." Ethan looked at it for only a brief moment and said quietly, "Destiny is not always broken. Sometimes people just stop trying too early." The hall froze again, because those words struck harder than a blade. They were true, painfully true, yet they challenged thousands of years of belief in divine fate. Challenge like that would get anyone executed under normal laws. But this moment was not normal. This human was not normal. And even the queen felt a sharp sting inside, as if someone had torn open a truth she buried long ago. She stepped closer until her face was inches from his, her golden crown humming with quiet cosmic energy. "Do you truly believe all limits can be broken?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze calmly. "Limits exist to be tested," he replied, his tone gentle but firm. It was not arrogance. It was simple conviction, and that made it even stronger. The warlord beside the queen growled, his fist clenching, "Your Majesty, we cannot allow such disrespect to divine technology. Permission to end him now," he shouted, but the queen lifted one finger and the warlord fell silent at once. Her mind was a battlefield, torn between tradition and truth, between vengeance and curiosity. For years she believed her armor's flaw reflected her fate, a scar that meant she could never truly be whole. She had accepted it as destiny. But now a human stood saying destiny was just unfinished work. And that cut deeper than any blade ever could. The hall lights dimmed for a moment as the armor systems hummed with new vitality. As if breathing fresh cosmic air, the queen felt it again. Strength flowing through her bones, through her lungs, through her soul, like a quiet promise she never expected. She whispered to herself more than to anyone. Impossible, but the armor disagreed. It glowed stronger, alive, loyal, healed. She turned her gaze back to Ethan, who simply stood there with hands behind his back, not triumphant, not proud, just calm like someone who fixed a machine and moved on. And that calmness made the entire empire uneasy because they worshipped power, but he worshipped function. They bowed to tradition, he bowed to results. They threatened fear, he ignored it. And a universe where humans thought like that was a universe that could not be controlled by ancient rules. The queen suddenly waved her hand and ordered, "Take him to the inner forge chambers." A command that shocked everyone. The inner forge was no ordinary place. It was the heart of royal technology, where only chosen ones ever entered. A place of secrets older than most civilizations. Gasps filled the air. Some soldiers looked horrified. Some priests started chanting like the world was ending. But the queen did not care. She needed to know the truth now. Not myths, not legends, truth. Ethan nodded without hesitation, showing zero fear, as if walking into danger was the same as walking into a workshop. And as he followed the guards deeper into the sacred halls, the queen stared at the repaired crack shining softly over her heart. She did not know if she wanted to kill him later or protect him forever. But one thing was certain. Something had changed. In the armor, in the empire, and inside her. And the galaxy would soon feel the tremor of a truth humans always carried quietly. That sometimes the deadliest weapon is not war, but a mind that refuses to bow. Court of Assassins. The sacred inner halls of the palace were carved from dark starstone, glowing softly with blue runes that pulsed like beating hearts. Ancient energy flowed through the walls like rivers, whispering secrets from forgotten ages. The path was long and silent. Only the soft echo of footsteps followed Ethan as royal guards escorted him forward, each guard towering, armored in shimmering plates, their faces emotionless, but their eyes watched him like he was a spark that might ignite a universe. Yet Ethan walked calmly, hands relaxed, as if this palace of gods and monsters was just another workshop corridor. He did not worship these walls, nor fear the ancient humming power around him. He was simply thinking, quietly, like always, about how things worked and how they could be improved. That was his nature, and nature rarely bends to fear. But in the shadows above, hidden between columns of living crystal, the assassins prepared. The queen had not ordered his death, but some in her court could not allow a human to live after touching divine armor, especially when he had succeeded. Silent whispers had spread through the palace like poison. Fear mixed with anger, tradition mixed with paranoia. And fear often gives birth to blades. The assassins, cloaked in darkness and sacred silence, moved like ghosts. They were the queen's own forbidden order, trained to erase threats before they grew. Their mandate older than laws. Protect the throne from all things alien, unknown or impossible, and this human was all three. They followed him through the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike, confident he could never sense them because no one ever had, not even psychic empaths or battle monks. But Ethan's steps slowed slightly, his head tilted, as if noticing a small sound in a quiet machine room. He did not turn, did not panic, but something in his eyes changed. Not fear, but awareness. He was taken to a high-secure chamber, doors sealed with ancient sigils, guards posted outside like statues. Inside was dim light, strange floating tools, mechanical arms, glowing diagrams. A workshop not for ordinary metal, but for living technology, alien and divine mixed. Yet Ethan looked at it with curiosity, not reverence, and that itself would have been considered treason if anyone saw into his thoughts. Then came the silence, heavy, waiting, the moment before predators strike. Ethan calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small handheld device, a simple diagnostic scanner he built himself. Harmless looking, but inside it was his logic, his understanding, his quiet human stubbornness to always be prepared. He began studying the forge systems, acting like nothing else mattered. And that was when the shadows moved. Fast, silent, deadly. 3 assassins dropped like falling knives, blades glowing with venom energy, aiming straight for his throat and spine. But the room suddenly flashed as hidden defense turrets swung alive, locking onto the assassins with perfect precision. Gasps of surprise filled the chamber as mechanical arms grabbed the assassins mid-air. Plasma fields pinned them down. Even the guards outside jumped at the noise. Rushing in confused, Ethan only looked up slowly. Placing his device down like someone who just finished tightening the last bolt, he spoke softly, almost disappointed. "You should disable surveillance before attempting a silent kill." His voice calm like he was giving technical advice. Not surviving assassination, the guards froze, unsure whether to arrest the assassins or the human. The captured assassins hissed like cornered beasts. One snarled, "You are not supposed to see us." But Ethan shook his head lightly. "Everything leaves a trace, even shadows," he said. "Machines always whisper before they break." To everyone else, that sentence was mysterious, but to him it was simple. Nothing in a system is truly silent. Not motion, not shifting weight, not vibration in the air. He noticed what others could not because he saw the world differently, and that difference made him dangerous. News traveled fast through psychic channels. And soon the queen entered with heavy steps, her aura burning, her cape moving like dark fire. The soldiers bowed instantly, heads lowered. She looked at the restrained assassins, then at Ethan standing calmly in the center. No fear, no triumph, only that quiet engineer focus. Her voice was cold iron. "Who ordered this?" she demanded, her tone lethal, but no one answered. Fear silenced every tongue, because to admit ordering it meant death. Yet she already knew the truth. This was not one person's order. It was tradition, fear, ancient belief reacting like a wounded beast. She dismissed the room with a wave. Walls trembled as soldiers withdrew. Only she and Ethan remained. Staring at each other in the dim light of the sacred forge, she studied him long, trying to understand the thread of fate that tied him to this moment. "You anticipated assassination," she said quietly. Not a question, but a statement. Ethan nodded. "Fear makes people act quickly and stupidly," he replied calmly. "I just prepared for that." Something inside her twisted. Irritation. Respect, confusion, maybe even admiration. She was a queen, shaped by war and blood, by pride and destiny. She had never met someone who treated gods and killers the same way, just variables to solve, systems to understand, she whispered. Every empire fears what it cannot control. And Ethan replied softly, "Things you fear, you destroy." She met his gaze, and for a brief moment, there was silence without hostility. Just two beings trying to understand each other through a wall built by history and power. Suddenly she stepped closer, voice lowering. "If you misstep even once, I will end you myself," she warned. But Ethan did not shrink. His eyes held steady. "Then I will make sure not to misstep," he answered, not defiant, simply factual. His tone made her chest tighten with a feeling she did not recognize. Not weakness, not anger, but something like involuntary respect. A dangerous feeling because respect could grow into trust, and trust could shatter kingdoms or build new worlds. When she turned away, she spoke one last line without looking back. Voice like quiet thunder. "From this moment, no hand touches you without my command, even if it belonged to a god," and with that she left, leaving Ethan alone with the hum of ancient machines, and a silent truth spread through the palace like lightning. The queen did not save him out of mercy. She saved him because she needed to know what he was, and whether he was a threat or a miracle. Meanwhile, in the halls above, nobles trembled, assassins whispered, and soldiers prayed, because they all understood the terrifying possibility now. If a human could survive the sacred assassins, fix divine armor, and stand unshaken before a queen feared by galaxies, then maybe humans were not weak creatures. Maybe they were the silent storm, the quiet builders who could reshape fate not by violence but by refusing to bow. And that kind of power frightened the Empire more than any weapon ever could. The Queen's test, the sacred forge chamber awakened around Ethan, lights rising like dawn across alien metal veins. The massive forge heart pulsed like a living star, each throb sending ripples of heat and power through the air. This place was not just a workshop. It was ancient power folded into technology. Living circuits woven with forgotten gods, only chosen royal smiths were ever allowed to enter. And yet here stood a simple human engineer, calm as if walking through his own workplace. The Queen's command echoed in the chamber still, her voice edged with challenge and curiosity. "If you are not a liar or a fool, then prove it," she had said. And now he faced a relic older than the Empire itself. A shattered Valyrian soul blade resting on an altar of starstone. It glowed faintly, flickering like a dying star, cracks running through its core like frozen lightning. The forge priests gathered behind thick barriers. Watching with fear and anger, they prayed silently, believing the relic would reject this mortal intruder, believing he would burn where he stood. Yet Ethan did not bow or chant. He did not seek blessing or fear curses. He simply studied the blade the same way a builder studies a broken bridge, eyes tracing lines of damage, fingers hovering over ancient energy channels. Breathing slow, the Queen stood high on a platform above, her golden armor alive with cosmic shimmer, observing not only his technique but his soul. She did not want to be impressed. She did not want to be inspired, but part of her already was. She wanted to understand what he was. A danger, a miracle, or something the universe had sent to rewrite fate. Without hesitation, Ethan reached toward the relic, and the priests gasped, expecting him to scream as ancient power burned through him. But his hand moved steadily, brushing the blade lightly, like he was touching a fragile bird wing, not divine steel. And then he whispered softly, almost to himself. Damage spread from stress point. Energy flow collapsed. The crystal lattice fractured because someone forced power instead of guiding it. His voice was gentle, but his words struck the priests like thunder. How could a human speak of sacred structures like ordinary engineering? The Queen's eyes narrowed as she felt her pulse match the forge's hum. She had never seen someone treat divine creations like puzzles instead of miracles, and yet the blade responded, its flickering glow softening, almost as though relieved someone finally understood it. He activated forge tools, but instead of traditional ones, he used a small multi-tool he carried himself, a human instrument powered by human logic. Priests hissed in outrage, some pounding the glass. "Blasphemy! Mortal tools cannot touch relic metal," they cried, but Ethan ignored them. Because his world did not care for sacred fear. His world cared for solutions. His hands moved with precise calm, adjusting angles, directing energy flow, sealing cracks not by force but by harmony. Like tuning a delicate instrument instead of forging a weapon, sweat rolled down his forehead. But his eyes never left the blade, and slowly, impossibly, the relic began to glow steadily again, the cracks softening, mending, lines of light weaving like threads of fate being rewoven, the chamber filled with a hum that felt alive, like the relic was breathing again after centuries of suffocating under tradition. The queen leaned forward, her heart thundering. She had expected failure, or arrogance, or foolishness, but this calm human dedication unsettled her more than any enemy army ever had. He was not trying to prove superiority. He was simply doing what he believed was right, fixing what was broken. That was his truth, and truth was more powerful than fear. When Ethan lifted the blade gently, the relic sang, a low, resonant tone that only true forge masters ever heard. Priests fell to their knees in shock. One whispered hopelessly, "This is not possible. How does a mortal draw life from sacred steel?" Ethan placed the glowing blade on the altar, and the forge light settled like stars calming after a storm. He exhaled quietly, saying, "It only needed respect and understanding, not force." His voice was tired but peaceful, like someone who had completed a duty rather than bragging about a miracle. The queen descended slowly from her platform, every step deliberate. When she reached him, she did not look at the blade first. She looked at him, eyes sharp, searching. Confused by her own thoughts, in her empire everything had order, power, hierarchy, gods above mortals, royals above all, yet this human did not fit any rule, shaping the fate of divine relics not through prayer, but through determination. She picked up the blade and it thrummed in her hand. Alive, stronger than before, her expression barely changed, but inside something shifted. For the first time in centuries, she felt possibility instead of limitation. She asked quietly, "Why do humans risk their lives for things that are not theirs? Why fix something sacred to others?" Ethan looked at her, simple sincerity in his voice. Because something broken should not stay broken. Because someone has to fix what others give up on. His words struck her deeper than any weapon could, because she realized they were not about armor or relics. They were a reflection of him, of humanity, of stubborn hope. The room stayed silent, the relic humming gently like a newborn star. The queen looked down at the blade again, then at him, shadows and light crossing her face, and she felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. Respect was turning into something warmer, curiosity into something sharper. She had met warriors, conquerors, geniuses, prophets, but never someone whose power came from refusing to surrender to impossibility. And in that moment she understood, this human could reshape destinies not by destruction, but by mending what others abandoned, and that frightened her more than any enemy ever had, because a person like that can change empires. Not with swords or armies, but with belief and action. She stepped back slowly, and the forge chamber bowed to silence. But the future had already shifted, as Ethan cleaned his tool quietly. Unaware, he had just rewoven the fate of worlds with simple, stubborn care. The queen looked at him one last time and whispered, barely audible, "You are not here by chance. Human." But whether it was praise or warning, even she was not sure. All she knew was this. The galaxy had just woken up to a truth it had long ignored, that humans did not rise by permission, they rose by will, and that kind of will could not be stopped by kings, gods, or destiny. Truth of the Empire. When Ethan completed the relic and the forge dimmed to a soft glow, the queen signaled him to follow. She walked with a pace that made even the palace walls seem to bow, her armor shining brighter now, as if his repairs had awakened something ancient inside it. They entered a guarded passage where the air felt heavier, like the very stones remembered thousand-year secrets. Ethan walked behind her, not as a servant but as someone who belonged, not by right, not by royal command, but by pure merit, and that unsettled every soldier who watched him pass. Because in this empire nobody earned place, they inherited it. Yet here was a human who entered sacred ground simply by doing what others could not, and that truth echoed louder than any announcement. The queen stopped before a sealed chamber, a vault of black star metal engraved with symbols of life and death. She placed her palm on the surface, and the door opened with a deep cosmic sigh. Inside was a room quiet as eternity, shelves filled with relics, ancient helmets, broken gauntlets, pieces of battle armors worn by rulers long turned to dust, and in the center lay a crystalline sarcophagus that glowed faint. Pulsing like a weak dying star, Ethan saw a figure lying inside, covered in shimmering layers of armor. Lifeless yet untouched by time, his eyes softened. Sensing sadness heavy in the air, the queen's voice dropped to a tone he had never heard before, softer, almost human. "This was my sister," she whispered, each word heavy like falling worlds. She stepped closer to the crystal coffin, her fingers brushing its edge, her breath steady but her eyes distant. She fought for this empire with her whole soul, and when the armor cracked, it cracked her life too. Ethan understood instantly. The armor was not mere metal, it was life-bound, a soul shell, and any fracture cut into the wearer as well. The queen continued, "Our sacred armor is not just protection, it is identity. It holds our spirit, our strength, our history." She looked at him now, pain behind her steel gaze. "When mine broke first time, I felt a part of myself die too, and no one could heal it." Ethan stared at the crystal chamber, understanding the grief hidden beneath her legend. The galaxy called her invincible, merciless, unstoppable. But here stood a sister mourning a sister she could not save. And in that moment, Ethan did not see a queen or a war sovereign. He saw a being carrying centuries of weight and loneliness. She turned to him sharply as if cutting her own memories. "Your repairs, human, they did not just fix metal. They touched life." Her tone was not pride or gratitude, but confusion, as though she could not decide whether to admire or fear him. Ethan replied quietly, "Metal is not alive, but the ones inside it are." Simple words, yet they landed in her heart like truth she had avoided for ages, because in her empire people worshipped armor, bloodline, and tradition. But this human saw the person before the throne, and that shook her more than any war. She stepped closer, shadows and light crossing her face. "Why do you speak like everything can be healed?" she asked. Voice brittle, Ethan's answer was soft but steady. "Because most things crack from neglect, not fate." And those words touched her like a blade. Because they pierced not armor, but her thoughts. For years, she believed destiny dictated pain, loss, sacrifice, but this human spoke like destiny was just rust waiting to be cleaned. And if someone just cared enough, repaired enough, nothing truly died. She hated how his view made her question her own truth. Yet she could not deny the warmth flowing in her chest where cold acceptance once lived. She exhaled slowly, looking at the relic coffin again. "My people obey strength and fear gods," she said. "But you fix what gods abandoned," and Ethan simply replied, "Power means nothing if it cannot protect." Another blow, gentle yet impossible to ignore because she had power, infinite, divine, feared across galaxies. And yet she failed to protect the one person she loved. And here stood someone with no throne, no army, no crown, who protected by mending instead of conquering. Silence wrapped the chamber, only the sarcophagus pulsing like a faint heartbeat. Finally, she looked at him with eyes half curious, half wounded. "You do not fear me, you do not worship me, you do not hate me," she murmured. "Why?" Ethan's expression stayed calm, sincere. "You are not my enemy, and you are not my God," he said. "You are someone who lost and still stands." Something inside her heart trembled. A war goddess hearing words not of praise or fear, but recognition. the kind only those who fix broken things understand deeply. And in that fragile moment she realized something terrifying. Humans did not challenge power by force. They changed it by understanding, and no empire in history survived a truth like that. She turned sharply, regaining her regal poise. Yet her voice carried a faint softness she could not hide. "Leave this chamber," she commanded. "I need silence." Ethan bowed slightly, not as a subject but as someone respecting grief, and he walked away, leaving her alone with the quiet heartbeat of memory. The door closed behind him, echoing gently, as if a chapter of her soul shifted. Outside, the guards stared at him differently now, not as a trespasser or a threat, but as a mystery they could not file into fear or duty. And deep in the chamber, the queen placed her palm on her sister's crystal tomb and whispered, voice breaking to herself, "What if he is right?" A question older than her crown and heavier than her throne. Because if humans were right, that everything broken could be repaired, then even the oldest wounds of the universe might heal one day. And that thought frightened her more than war because it meant hope had returned. And hope was harder to control than fear ever was. The hand raised. The royal courtyard of the Valyrian capital filled with thousands of soldiers, priests, nobles, and commanders standing under twin suns that burned like molten gold in the alien sky. Banners of the empire waved high, shimmering with ancient honor. War drums echoed across the city, causing even mountains to tremble. Today was not a normal gathering. The empire did not assemble like this unless a new era was about to be declared or someone was about to die. And in the center of the grand arena stood Ethan, alone, unarmored, surrounded by elite guards, his face calm as if he was standing in a peaceful workshop and not in front of a crowd ready to tear him apart. Aliens whispered in fear and anger, some demanding his death for touching the sacred armor, others watching him with curiosity, because rumors spread like wildfire. A human had repaired the queen's life armor, revived an ancient relic, and even survived the assassins. Such things did not happen in their world, yet they happened anyway. The great gates opened and the queen walked in, her repaired armor glowing stronger than ever before. Each step thundered like a cosmic heartbeat. Her presence made the wind kneel, her aura heavier than fate itself. As she stopped in front of Ethan, the crowd bowed in one synchronized motion, but he stood straight as always, unbending, not out of arrogance but because fear had never been his master. The queen studied him, her eyes colder than starlight yet burning with an emotion she could not name. The priests expected her to order his execution. The warriors expected a public punishment to protect tradition. But she raised her voice so the empire could hear her truth. "This human touched what no mortal dared," she declared, her words vibrating through the courtyard. "He challenged fate, broke law, and defied ancient fear." Silence spread like a shadow. The priests gripped their sacred staffs. Ready to bless his death, the commanders smirked. Certain justice was about to fall. And yet the queen was not finished. She lifted her hand, armor pulsing with new life. And yet, he repaired what gods could not. He strengthened what destiny had broken. "And he healed the armor that carries my soul." Gasps echoed like a storm across mountains. Nobles exchanged shocked glances. Priests froze, some trembling, because her words were not condemnation. They were recognition. The empire had never heard praise given to a human. It was an impossible moment. Something ancient cracked that day. Not armor, not stone, but belief. The queen's gaze locked with Ethan's, and for a moment the world disappeared around them. "Power meeting, quiet courage," she continued. "Strength is not only in battle," she said. Her voice softer now, but even more commanding. "Sometimes strength is in the one who fixes what others destroy." The crowd did not know whether to cheer or fear, because they had never been taught to admire builders, only conquerors. She raised her arm and the sky shimmered as banners shifted on palace towers. She declared, "From this moment, Ethan of Earth is royal engineer of the Valyrian throne. Protector of my life armor." Shock exploded across the courtyard. Priests cried out, soldiers tightened grips on their weapons, some in disbelief, others in awe. and in the center of everything stood Ethan, unmoved, calm as when he first raised his hand hours ago. But the queen leaned closer, her voice low enough only he could hear. "Do not misunderstand, human. This position protects you, but it also binds you to me." A warning layered with something unspoken. Trust. Confusion, maybe something deeper. He nodded slightly. "I did not come to rule," he replied softly. "I only came to fix what is broken." She swallowed the unexpected warmth that line placed in her chest because no one had ever seen her as someone who needed fixing. Yet he did, not through insult but through understanding. And that was far more dangerous than rebellion. Suddenly, one angry warlord roared from the ranks. "He is a weak creature, not worthy. He did nothing but tinker." And before anyone could react, Ethan calmly lifted his hand. Just like he did when he first confessed he repaired her armor, that single gesture silenced thousands. Not because he commanded authority, but because he commanded certainty. A quiet certainty that broke fear. Then he spoke, not loudly, but with steady clarity. "If weakness is fixing what others fear to touch, then I accept weakness." The words sliced through the arena like clean steel. The queen's eyes widened by a fraction because she realized something terrifying. This human did not need a throne, did not need armies. His strength came from truth, and truth does not bow to crowns. The warlord clenched his jaw, but he did not move. Because there are times when even warriors feel small before someone who simply stands without fear. The queen lifted her spear and stabbed it into the ground, the planet itself trembling. "Any who challenge him challenge me," she announced, voice fierce, and the crowd roared. Some in loyalty, some in panic, some in confusion. But destiny had already shifted, because sometimes change does not start with war drums. It starts with one quiet hand raised against tradition, refusing to kneel, refusing to fear. And the galaxy would remember this day not as the day a human survived, but as the day a human stood beside a queen feared by stars and did not break. Ethan did not smile, did not bask in victory. He simply lowered his hand and whispered to himself, "Work is not finished." Because builders never see endings, only the next repair, the next challenge, the next broken thing to make whole again, and above them, the armor on the queen's chest shimmered brightly, alive, stronger than ever, as if even the metal understood that fate had just been rewritten by hands that fixed instead of destroyed. And in that shining reflection, the Empire saw the beginning of something new. Not ruled by fear, not worshipping scars, but shaped by those who believe even destiny can be repaired if someone has the courage to try.